In America, we usually use a different system, but for all scientific purposes, the SI system is used. A meter is used to measure length or width, like the measurements of this baking tray. Liters are used to measure volume, like the volume of this milk. Grams measure mass, which is different from weight because weight is based on gravitational pull. It is measured with the same units as force, newtons. Mass is based on how much matter an object has. Inertia is resistance to change in motion. It is easier to push the spoon across the counter than the milk jug because the milk jug has more mass. More mass means more inertia. Even though the milk jug has more mass, it is less dense than the spoon. Density is a measure of mass in a specific volume. So since 2 liters of metal is heavier than 2 liters of milk, the spoon is more dense. Matter is anything with mass and volume. Everything in this kitchen has matter. Matter can be changed physically, like mixing sugar with milk and flour, or chemically, like baking the cupcakes in the oven. Physical changes are not permanent. Chemical changes are.
Now, while Lourdes is cooking, I'm going to talk about Newton's laws. Newton's 3 laws have to do with motion. The first is the law of inertia. An object at rest will stay at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force, and the same with an object in motion. The second dictates that force equals mass times acceleration. And the final Newton's law states that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Motion is a change in location from a reference point. Motion can be caused by force, which is the push or pull on an object. Force is measured in newtons using a spring scale. Lourdes is using force to push the ingredients into the bowl. Gravity is a universal pull on objects. The more mass and less distance there is, the more gravity there is. A fluid is a free-flowing material that fits to the shape of a container. All fluids exert buoyant force. If you were to drop something into the batter, it might float if it is less dense than the batter. Archimedes' principle states that the buoyant force equals the weight of the fluid displaced by an object. There will be more force on tinfoil placed on top of the batter than on a marble dropped in. There are 2 other similar principles, Bernoulli's and Pascal's. Pascal's principle states that the fluid at equilibrium exerts a pressure in all directions, like the cupcake batter. Bernoulli's principle says that a fluid with a great velocity has less pressure.
When I break this egg into the bowl, gravity will pull it down. It will start at a slower speed and then it will accelerate until it reaches its maximum velocity at the bottom of the bowl. We could calculate the velocity by dividing the time it took by the distance it traveled. Once we know the starting and ending velocity, we can calculate acceleration by dividing the change in velocity by the change in time.
Work is a transfer of energy that causes an object to move in the direction of the force. If you push this bowl, it moves. You are working. It is measured in joules and calculated force times distance. The measure of how fast work is done is power. It is measured in watts and calculated work divided by time. If you were to push this bowl up a ramp, you would be using a simple machine. Machines make work easy. Mechanical efficiency is a comparison of work input to output. Mechanical advantage is how many times a machine multiplies force. There are 6 simple machines: lever, wedge, inclined plane, screw, wheel and axle, and pulley. When you do work, it takes energy. Energy is the capacity to do work. You can do more work with more energy. There are 2 types of energy. The 2 main types of energy are kinetic and potential. They add up to mechanical. Kinetic energy is the energy of motion. When you stir a bowl, you are changing your potential energy, or the energy position, into kinetic energy. Other forms include thermal, chemical, electrical, sound, light, and nuclear energy. When you cook the cupcakes, you add thermal energy. Changing from potential energy to kinetic energy is an energy conversion, changing from one form of energy to another. When eating cupcakes, your body uses the food's chemical energy to make kinetic energy. Energy comes from energy resources. The original resource is the sun. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred from one type to another. There are 2 laws that we haven't talked about. Boyle's law states that there's an inverse relationship between pressure and volume. And there's also Charles's law that states that there's a direct relationship between temperature and volume.
Phase change is a physical change of matter involving energy. There are 4 stages: solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. When a piece of ice turns into water, it's called melting. Liquid turning into gas is called evaporation. Gas to plasma is called ionization. These are endothermic phase changes that require adding energy. Freezing, condensation, and deionization are all endothermic phase changes, which require removing energy. Physical science is the study of physics and chemistry. Physics is the study of matter and energy.
Chemistry is the study of matter and its interactions.
Science is man-made knowledge of nature and is always changing. The steps in the scientific method change as well, but it always starts with observation. While the cupcakes bake, the temperature and heat rise. The oven uses conduction, convection, and radiation to bake the cupcakes. Conduction occurs when the metal bars transfer heat to the metal baking tray. Convection occurs when the hot air of the oven heats the metal bars and the cupcakes. Radiation occurs when the heat waves go through the cupcakes. All that energy from our cupcakes, we can talk about waves. Waves have a lot to do with radiation, which is definitely not a good way to cook a cupcake. But it does play a small role in it. We couldn't make our cupcakes without them. Waves are disturbances that transmit energy. Particles do not travel with waves. There are two types, mechanical, which needs a medium, and electromagnetic, which doesn't. Electromagnetic have lots to do with radiation. There are also two shapes of waves. Transverse waves are perpendicular to the disturbance, and longitudinal are parallel. Sound waves are longitudinal and made of vibrations. All waves have wavelength, wave speed, and frequency. They also have amplitude. They are made of crests and troughs. Light waves are different. They are electromagnetic and part of the electromagnetic spectrum. The electromagnetic spectrum goes radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays.
We should get made class.
So cute!
Butter is strange. It's not really a solid or a liquid.
It just melts, Natalie.
Ooh.
It's a solid and it melts.
This is a liquid. This is half liquid and it's melting right now.
It's like saying water is half liquid, half solid, because sometimes it's a liquid and sometimes it's a solid.
It is though. It's so crazy.